Good morning, everyone. My name is Bart van Heijswijk, and together with my colleagues David Beckers and Marita Mitrovic, I work at the Dutch Consulate General in Shanghai for the Netherlands Innovation Network. I'm glad to see you're all interested to hear more about expanding your business to China. So with this presentation, we would like to give you a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges of doing so. Of course, we welcome any questions you have, and we will try to answer them. But in order to keep things a bit organized, we would like to ask you to write down your questions in the chat, and we will address them in the Q&A session after this presentation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Netherlands Innovation Network, so let me just give a very short introduction. We are part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy and have offices in 16 countries around the world. In China, we also have an office at the embassy in Beijing and at our consulate in Guangzhou in southern China. With 9 people, our China team is the biggest country team within the Netherlands Innovation Network. Our goal is to help Dutch high-tech companies, universities, and research institutes to find partners in China for cooperation on R&D and innovation-related activities, but also help you to expand your business in China. We do this across many sectors, so we do not have a specific industry focus. China is a huge country, so there are business opportunities in many different industries. We also have an economic department at the consulate, and although there definitely is some overlap in our services and activities sometimes, in general, we at the innovation department focus more on the earlier stages of the value chain, from fundamental research to market introduction. Our colleagues at the economic department are more involved in the issues that arise during and after market introduction, such as trade barriers, legal issues, etc. One of the topics that we actually do work closely together on is our startup activities. Our first startup activities in Shanghai were in 2016, as seen on the top left picture, when Prince Constantijn led a small delegation of Dutch companies to explore the Shanghai startup ecosystem. We also tried to facilitate connections between the Dutch and Chinese startup ecosystems, so we brought a group of Chinese startups, entrepreneurs, and other relevant players in the ecosystem to the Netherlands. We visited Rockstart, Hightech Excel, and then still Startup Delta at B Amsterdam, as you can see in the other pictures. We also organized 2 bootcamps for Dutch startups. And here you can see some pictures of the first one in 2017, which coincided with CES Asia. You're all familiar with CES in Las Vegas, or online this year, but CTA hosted the CES Asia show for 5 years in Shanghai as well. In October 2019, we organized another bootcamp for Dutch startups in cooperation with a Chinese partner, Tuspark from Nanjing. These activities are not comparable to the missions and activities that are organized for CES in Las Vegas, Slush, or other big events in other countries, with sometimes 60 to 70 startups in a huge Dutch delegation. We prefer to organize missions for small groups of companies, let's say maximum 10 to 15, and focused on a specific sector, so we can add more value to the participants, but also to the Chinese counterparts that we try to connect them to. Another reason that we prefer smaller groups is that there's just not a lot of interest of Dutch high-tech companies and startups to come to China. We understand that. China is far away, often unknown, and because of the cultural differences, it's probably easier to expand to other international markets first. Of course, these are all legitimate reasons and concerns, but there are also many opportunities in China. And if you are an entrepreneur that likes a challenge, which you probably all do, you should definitely at least consider China. We realized that even many of the companies that decided to make the trip to China to explore the opportunities here did really not know much about China and doing business here. That is why we created the Startup Playbook Shanghai, a website under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs China website, where we share the basic information about doing business in China with a focus on the startup ecosystem in Shanghai. In this presentation today, I will use some content of the playbook, and I think a good start would be this introduction movie.
ByteDance, Didi Juxing, DJI, and Neo. Chances are that you haven't even heard of any of them, but these Chinese unicorns are among the most valuable on the global market. The mix of a fast-growing economy, a focus on innovation, and a tech-savvy consumer base has triggered a true startup boom in China. In recent years, the amount of unicorns grew from 8 in 2014 to 92 in early 2019. China now has, after the United States, the most unicorn startups in the world. This staggering growth is just another example of what's been called China speed, the unprecedented adoption and market penetration of new technologies by the Chinese market. Or should we say Chinese markets? Because if you want to profit from China's thriving startup scene, you better choose your point of entry wisely. Shanghai has a prosperous startup ecosystem with among the best funding opportunities in the world. Hundreds of co-working spaces, more than 500 incubators, and an extensive English-speaking and internationally oriented business community. Shanghai is China speed. It's the country's richest city. About 20% of the Chinese GDP is generated in and around Shanghai. Its citizens are very receptive to new technologies. It has one of the highest adoption rates for new mobile technologies. And it has a large talent pool. Some of China's best universities are here. Would you like to know more about the opportunities and challenges of bringing your startup to China? To help Dutch startups with their scaling strategies, we've created the Startup Playbook Shanghai. In this playbook, you can find key insights from fellow entrepreneurs and experienced experts on doing business here. They will advise you not to be mesmerized by the size of the Chinese market, but instead by its speed of innovation. So find your own niche market and shift your startup into high gear to stay ahead of the competition. Of course, the playbook also includes basic information on how to protect your IP, cultural insights on HR practices, and a list of promising sectors for Dutch startups. Interested? Please visit our playbook by clicking on the link below and contact us at China Speed.
This was a quick introduction to the Shanghai startup ecosystem, but I want to address a couple of topics in more detail. First, the role of the government. As you know, the government plays a very important role in everything in China, also in doing business. So it's important to understand the government's policies related to innovation, entrepreneurship, and international cooperation. You may know the Chinese government works with 5-year plans, which are a kind of blueprint of the priorities and developments for government policy in the coming 5 years. We are still in the 13th 5-year plan, but in March this year, the 14th 5-year plan will officially be published. This slide provides an overview of the most important themes of the current 5-year plan. And as you can see, innovation and entrepreneurship are top priorities of the government. We are quite sure this will not change in the next 5-year plan. Other topics that are mentioned are advanced manufacturing, IoT, Made in China 2025, and also important, better protection of intellectual property rights. The Chinese government has issued many policies to promote mass entrepreneurship and innovation, as they call it, something that we would probably describe as developing the startup ecosystem. And this has paid off already. There are many young Chinese tech companies that really develop new products and services that became very successful, and the government allows those companies to experiment with these new technologies. So China is definitely not only the factory of the world anymore, although a lot of manufacturing still takes place here, but there's much more focus on innovation and technology as well. We can also see this from the Global Innovation Index, a ranking of countries based on their innovation performance, published every year by the World Intellectual Property Organization, INSEAD, and Cornell University. We are currently ranked number 5 in the Netherlands, 1 spot down from last year, and China is ranked number 14. But China has consistently moved up this ranking for many years now, and is already ranked higher than, for example, Japan. China is the only country within the top 25 that is still considered an upper middle income country, and not yet a high income country. Because we are in Shanghai, and you've seen the pictures of this city, this definitely is not representative of the whole country. There are many differences within China. But what we do see all over China and all over the world, I think, is that innovation is not necessarily carried out anymore by the big corporations with huge R&D budgets. Speed is more important than size. And getting to market quickly and having the flexibility to adapt to market needs are today's drivers for innovation. This is also, or maybe especially, the case in China. We also want to let some local experts share their experiences with you. So let's listen to Luc Eliens, who came to China in 2017 to lead the China office for High-Tech Excel, the accelerator and corporate innovation platform from Eindhoven, and now serves as a chief commercial officer for High-Tech Excel's local partner Xnode, who we introduced them to back in 2016.
Most of the fast-growing technology companies, when they think about expanding, they almost automatically look at the US as a first primary market. Whereas China has one of the biggest markets in the world, has been consistently growing for many years, and is looking for innovation nowadays. So China is an extremely interesting market. What I've seen so far, if you are a company that's focused on business to business, And if you have a specific technology or IP position that's differentiating, then you should consider China. If you're willing and able to put a team on the ground in China for an extended period of time, so that means if you're willing to invest in China as a potential market, if you have a product that actually has customers and that has proven itself, if you have this IP position that we talked about before, then you are ready to come to China. And then it can be hugely successful, but you need to give it time. You need to give it time to build the right partners. You need to give it time to recruit the right Chinese individuals. You need to give it time to maybe adapt your go-to-market strategy. And what I see a lot going wrong is young European companies are offered to come to China, and they come on a kind of tourism trip where for 2 weeks they meet many different Chinese government or Chinese incubators or Chinese companies, and then they leave and then they feel they've seen China. But obviously that doesn't work. You need long-term commitment. You need to, in many cases, change your strategy. You need to, in many cases, build the team here, build the relationship here, and that you cannot do in 2 weeks.
So China's economy is still growing fast, even in 2020. Due to the quite strict COVID-19 policies, the pandemic has only disrupted China's industries and supply chains for a couple of months. But Luc also mentioned there are many challenges with doing business in China. Many of these challenges arise because of something we call China speed. Everything moves fast here. For example, consumer behavior. Chinese consumers are quite sensitive to trends, and understanding the local consumer behavior is super challenging, especially for foreigners. One example of this is mobile payments. In many stores, like this coffee shop close to our consulate, you can only pay with your phone. There are just no other options. This change to a cashless society happened almost overnight because everybody in China owns a smartphone. There are cheap options here too, and everybody uses either WeChat Pay or Alipay. So even the small grocery stores in the small towns in rural China now use QR codes for payment, for years already actually. Something else that comes very fast is competition. Chinese entrepreneurs are extremely opportunistic and jump at every opportunity. Let me explain with these graphs, which are a bit outdated, but the mechanism still holds. The y-axis in these graphs shows the number of companies in a specific vertical or sector, and the x-axis represents time. So the graph on the left shows companies in the coupon e-commerce sector, or group buying. This was popularized by Groupon, which was founded in the US in November 2008. So immediately in 2008 and 2009, Chinese companies were established doing the exact same thing, but then in the Chinese market. And at some point in 2010 or 11, there were more than 5,000 Chinese companies active in the coupon e-commerce sector. Of course, this is not sustainable, and after a while, most of them died, and only a few survived to divide the market among them. At the height of the coupon e-commerce business in the US, there were less than 650 companies doing this, which just shows how competitive the Chinese market is. The other two graphs show similar patterns for the P2P online lending sector, which is even more extreme, and the live streaming sector. So these three examples are all sectors where business model innovation is key, and the business is done only online. But in China, this same mechanism also applies to other sectors, and bike sharing is definitely the most prominent example. A couple of years ago, there were around 20 bike sharing companies here in Shanghai, all having bikes in a different color, and all these companies received enormous amounts of funding. But now there are basically 2 companies left in the bike sharing market. So you could argue a lot of money has been wasted, but it also helped speed up innovation, and those who provided the best consumer experience have survived. So if you are in a consumer-facing business and you plan to try to go at the Chinese market by yourself, be prepared to get killed by the local competition. It doesn't sound nice, but your local competitors understand the local consumer behavior much better than you ever will. I also want to point out here that this extreme competition is not a problem exclusively for foreign companies. Foreign entrepreneurs and companies often complain that their ideas get copied or stolen in China. Well, it does not only apply to you, it applies to everyone, also the Chinese entrepreneurs and startups. If you bring a good new business idea to market in China, there will be competitors doing the exact same thing literally the next week. Unless, of course, there are high entry barriers, and it's not that easy to copy what you are doing. In general, competition in B2C is a lot more fierce than in B2B. Another important characteristic of the Chinese market that you have to pay attention to if you are considering expanding to China is the so-called tech ecosystem. As you can see here, the China internet is much bigger than the US internet, and almost everyone is online on their smartphones. Also, the growth of mobile internet and payments is much higher in China than in the US. I called it the China internet and the US internet, which is actually not far from the truth. Or maybe it should be called the China internet and the rest of the world internet. Of course, China has a great firewall, which blocks certain websites and apps, but that is not the only reason for these two separate internets. Chinese consumers just use different apps and tools for everything. On this slide, you see the key players in the US and China for different verticals. From left to right, it's search, shopping, payment, videos, music, messaging, social media, short video, etc. And let me tell you, there is literally no overlap at all here. I guess you all know TikTok, which is a product of ByteDance, a Chinese company, and you see their logo in the middle on both the China and the US side. But in China, their app is called Douyin, and it's completely separated from TikTok, the international version. So again, this is another explanation why B2C business in China is completely different from the Netherlands, Europe, or frankly, anywhere outside China. And this makes it very challenging for foreign companies to compete in this space. I want to give you a quick look at the investor landscape, because that's also very different in China. Maybe you recognize some international companies like IDG, Matrix, Sequoia, and Walden, but you probably have not heard of most investors on this slide. Even for the global investors, their China portfolio is usually managed by a dedicated and independent China team. I'm sure you all heard stories about having so much money available in China. And this definitely used to be the case. But the last couple of years, investors have become a bit more cautious and maybe smarter. But having a Chinese investor on board would definitely still help you to expand your business here. To be interesting for Chinese investors, though, your company has to offer something that is promising in the Chinese market. It seldom happens that Chinese investors invest purely based on overseas business. I'm definitely not an investment expert, but I think another difference between the Netherlands or Europe and China is the role of corporate VCs. The big tech companies in China are very active investors, especially Alibaba and Tencent. They have become huge platform companies with enormous amounts of consumer data, but they also have many companies in their ecosystem. So they could be an interesting partner for companies with B2B solutions. So I tried to explain why so many things are different in China, and I did not even mention the language yet. But still, China could be an interesting market for you. You just have to prepare well, so it's great that you joined this session. And if you decide to go to China, it would be very helpful to find a local partner you can work with. You can hire Chinese people yourself, or you can set up some form of cooperation with a local company. But working with local people will really help you understand the market better and overcome many of the challenges that I just described. But I think it's better to let some experts explain this to you by themselves. First up is Robin Young, founder of Seedlink Technologies, an AI company active in the HR field with a Dutch co-founder. Then we hear from Luc Eliens again, and then from Wei Zhou, CEO and founder of Xnode, the local partner of Hightech XL. They will share their insights.
Partnerships are extremely important, so the right partner is essential for success. When we came to China, what we don't have here obviously is the network, what we don't have is the brand. So when we found Xnode, we found a Chinese partner that was privately owned, so not so much interference from government, that had a brand and a network, but that was lacking to some extent the content, the people and the quality element to the service. So we could add that while Xnode had the brand and the network. And in that sense, if you look at the assets that both sides could add to the equation, that was kind of 1 + 1 is 3. Without Xnode, we would absolutely not be where we are today. But the other way around is also true. Xnode would not be where it is today without Architecture.
So I've done businesses both without a local partner and with, and the amount of headache that I had understanding all the regulations when I didn't have a Chinese business partner were like 10x. And then when I did have a Chinese business partner, they just took care of it for me, right? All the issues with, the government, taxation, all these different pieces. Otherwise, you would have to hire people for each one of these functions. And it's not impossible, but it's more costly and more difficult. So highly recommended. It does take time to find someone who you can trust, who you think is on the same level as you. But clearly, having someone who's a local that understands culture, that understands how the government works, is a huge advantage. More important than anything else, I would say.
It's going to be definitely more difficult for foreign startups in the B2C sort of areas because you're going to compete head to head with the Chinese locals. The locals who know better of the market, who know better of the customer behavior, the locals who have access to the local clients and who have resources and connections. But when it comes to B2B, specifically in the hardcore technology side, I think there will be more opportunities in there. Specifically, if you have a proprietary technology, which is very much well protected and then command certain high level of entry barriers, then it's very likely you will create some business opportunities.
So it's clear that having local expertise, either in-house or with a partner, will benefit your expansion plans in China. But how to structure this depends on your personal preferences and the possibilities at hand. This will be a decision for a later stage, but here we just show some possibilities. For example, full ownership in a WOFE, a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, a joint venture with a local partner, or your own representative office. Of course, there are also other options, such as a contractual agreement with a distributor or a representative here. Another issue that comes up every time we talk to high-tech companies that are exploring their opportunities in China is IP protection. China has a bad image in this regard, and for good reasons. But China's attitude toward IP protection has definitely improved over the years. The legal system here is increasingly more effective in protecting intellectual property rights, and one of the reasons is that this has also become more important for Chinese high-tech companies. There are, however, many differences with our own IPR systems, so it's recommended to seek legal advice if you are planning to come to China. Please do this as soon as you make plans to expand to China, because most of the issues with regard to IP protection arise because companies did not pay enough attention to this from the very start of their expansion to China. A good resource for getting more information on IP protection in China is the China IPR SME Help Desk of the European delegation in Beijing. Another very important topic that I would like to talk a bit more about is the business culture in China, or actually the cultural differences with the Netherlands. Mentioned on this slide are patience and flexibility. Things can go fast here, as we've seen, at China speed, but it may take some time before things take off. You have to build relationships and trust first. And flexibility is definitely important here. Things change from day to day or even from hour to hour. This is just the way people work here. So you really have to say goodbye to the Dutch planning your agenda and making appointments week in advance mentality. Because people make appointments here for the next day or even for dinner the same evening. We already mentioned the importance of finding a good partner. But more in general, your personal network is extremely important for doing business in China. Many connections and meetings actually happen because of these personal networks. Also for us at the consulate, it helps that we work for the government, but whether we can be of help really depends on the people we meet, having mutual friends with potential partners, or just knowing someone who knows someone. So this is Guanxi, your personal network, and it's really something you should invest in. Let's hear from some other experts how you should use your personal relationships, patience and flexibility in different areas, such as HR, contracts, and managing your Chinese employees. You will hear from Wouter Rinia, Business Development Manager Asia for Brunel, Robin Young of Seedlink, Dennis Tang, CEO and co-founder of Dutch AI company Dashmode, who participated in one of our bootcamps and set up an office in Shanghai after that, and Luc Aliens of Hightech Excel.
Every week we get at least 10 inbound leads of people wanting to do something with us. And I remember in the beginning, in the first months when I was in China, I was amazed at all these beautiful partnerships we could build with all these different people. And I think it's really one of the big challenges to learn to say no and to focus on the couple of partnerships that are actually representing a win-win, both on the short and the long term. And this is something I had to learn myself as well, to manage my time properly and to really say no to certain things.
People really want to work for companies like Alibaba, like Huawei, like Tencent, and actually the foreign companies are becoming less attractive or attractive in a different way to work for. Really use all the different recruitment sources that are available. So you have local job boards, you have like LinkedIn, you have like special job apps where people are posting their CVs on. And because you are not an attractive employer, because they don't know you, You need to use much more proactive recruitment, so that's going to the market, approaching people yourself, and just post your vacancies and wait until somebody is applying. A tip that we can give to startups in China, and maybe try to engage already with talent, Chinese talent overseas, and try to bring them back to China and let them grow your company here. Don't always try to hire people straight from competitors or from like one of these big companies. Just try to find a way on developing your own talent pool. In that way you can avoid the whole war of talent with very high salaries, and you can basically create your own talent.
Also in the sense that that's something else that I really learned when it comes to managing a team. People will not speak up when there's an issue. So it's my job to find or detect the issues when or before they occur. So I need to kind of develop this antenna, if you will, for figuring out what's going on in the team and solving the issues before they occur. So maybe that's also a little bit more Chinese on my side. Obviously.
You talk about negotiation in the West, and the negotiation usually stops when the contract is signed. In China, that's usually when negotiation begins. So I think there's a lot of nuance in how you deal with contractual obligations here. So it's more about your relationship with people than it is about what's on paper. The important
point is in China, everything is difficult, but everything is possible at the same time. So I think that's one of the key learnings, that really if you try your hardest in China, at least it is all possible in the end. So that makes it really worth it. Stay calm. Why you should stay calm here is because there's a very big handshake that things can be done last minute. And with last minute, I literally mean last minute. Like, we're sitting in this wonderful office, and I was in a similar one in China, and I came there on the day of the opening, and the floor was not in it yet, you know? So they finished the floor like 30 minutes before the official opening. And you might think this is the outlier. No, this is the standard. If you're not up for a challenge, you definitely don't go. But if you're willing to work hard and give it your 2 cents and be unique, you have a very good chance at making it.
And finally, we want to zoom in a bit on Shanghai. That is where we are located and where we have our guanxi, or connections with the local ecosystem, and where we can be of most help. And Shanghai obviously is the most international city in China, which makes it relatively easier for foreign companies to explore their opportunities here.
Shanghai has always been the most vibrant commercial city in China. I mean, in order to test new ideas, new concepts, new business model innovations, and to apply the new technologies, Shanghai is most of the time is seen as the best place to be. And about what happens next, whether they move to Hangzhou, Nanjing, Chengdu, or northern part of China or southern part, is the next step. But most of the company will take Shanghai as the starting point or the landing pad.
So maybe after this session, you will also consider to come to Shanghai. It helps that you know us now, and we can hopefully point you in the right direction. But Shanghai can also be overwhelming if you come here for the first time. There are many incubators and accelerators in Shanghai, and fortunately there are also some good ones, among the more than 500. Here we just show some of the incubators and accelerators that actually support foreign entrepreneurs and startups. But it really depends on your niche and industry which one would be good for you. So just as an example, Roadshow of Xnode will share how they could help you build your company in China.
But how to do it is not that easy. I mean, you need to go through a process of understanding China first, knowing the Chinese customer first, knowing how to do business here first, because the practice has been fundamentally different. So actually we are setting up a generally speaking 8-week program, basically helping these guys to navigate through these difficulties. So before you stay and set up a company, don't do it, learn and test it first with a minimal cost. If you failed and you think China is too difficult, there's no product market fit, I should go back, fine, go back. I mean, at least within 8 weeks, you figure that out. For those who figure out the product market play, perfect. Then after this 2 months kind of period, you figure out China business plan, you know where you should go, then you start hiring people, then you start talking to local investors, then you set up an office and start doing real business.
Hopefully this presentation helped you to get a better understanding of doing business in China. As Dennis already mentioned, everything is difficult in China, but nothing is impossible. So don't let all the challenges you will face scare you away, but get informed, learn more about the business opportunities here, and then when we can travel freely again, take that step to come over and experience China with your own eyes. Only then you will be able to decide whether China is something for you or not. I'm sure you all have many questions, so let's continue with the Q&A.